The cedar in my front yard threw a lace of shadow over the porch, and the bulbs I had strung along the eaves cast a soft honey on the table. Cinnamon and pot roast and nutmeg held in the air like a promise I wanted to keep. I laid out my mother's lace runner and the good crystal. I ironed linen napkins until the fold lines were as sharp as a line of thought. On the sideboard, a silver frame held the Harlow family photo from 1979. Two boys in striped shirts, and the space between them that no one ever asked about. The frame hung the slightest bit crooked. I left it that way. In my apron pocket, a ring of keys rattled against each other. Front door, garage, attic, the little brass one that stuck in the utility closet. One key I did not carry. That one lived upstairs. Danny and Sophie arrived at 6 sharp, as they always did. Danny brought a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, the sort that knows what it is without saying so. Sophie had a simple bouquet of baby's breath tied with twine. She smelled like citrus and hand cream. Her hug was warm, her smile straight and easy. The smile had always made me uneasy. It meant she was good at smoothing rough places. I had a lifetime of rough places under rugs. "House looks beautiful," Mom Danny said, setting the bottle down. "Thank you," I said. "You two look well." We moved through the small talk like polite dancers. Weather, traffic on 99E, his new contract, the neighbor's dog that barks at leaves. I poured wine. I watched their hands. I listened for the heater upstairs. It hummed with that steady whir, the kind you forget until you remember, then cannot stop hearing. Danny's voice had a new weight under the cheer. He wore a navy sweater I had given him last Christmas. He kept glancing at the staircase behind my shoulder, then choosing not to. We ate slowly. The pot roast was tender. The carrots were sweet. Sophie complimented the seasoning with a soft perfect, then looked at me and then at Danny as if checking which of us needed that word more. I topped off their glasses. The heater hummed. The lace runner lay flat and behaved. Danny leaned toward Sophie, mouth close to her ear hand around his glass. The whisper was smaller than the room but larger than the night. I could not hear the words. I heard the intent. Sophie nodded without blinking. She dabbed her mouth with her napkin and placed it gently beside her plate. "I am going to use the restroom," she said. "There is one down here," I said, light as breath. "I know," she said and smiled. She rose. She did not turn toward the powder room tucked behind the kitchen. She set her steps on the staircase, slow and careful, on the runner I had shampooed that morning. Her hand slid up the rail I polish on Saturdays. She disappeared around the landing, and then her steps floated down the hall above us, faint and certain. Danny lifted his glass and pretended to study the color of the wine. "This is good," he said to the wine, to the space where Sophie had been to anyone who could answer. "It breathes well in this house," I said. "Everything does." He told me about the new project, about a rollout window and a team in Seattle. His words were neat, stacked like folded shirts. I answered in nods and small questions. I watched his eyes. He was in the room and not in the room. He was listening for the same thing I was listening for. Above us, a hinge cried out. A drawer slid. The sound ticked along the hallway like a tiny animal. I put my fork down. The heater filled the absence. The clock on the wall clicked each second into the next. Candle wax pooled around the wicks. "Do you want more carrots?" I asked. "I am fine," Danny said. He reached for his phone and then did not. He picked up his glass and then set it down. His thumb rubbed the rim without making a sound. 10 minutes became 20. The ceiling seemed lower, as if the weight of all the air on the second floor had come down to live with us. I smelled the pot roast cooling. I smelled the lemon oil I had rubbed into the banister. Laughter floated in from the street where someone walked a dog. Cars passed in small bursts. The heater ran and ran. "I will get coffee," I said. I left the French press in the kitchen. It was a sentence with a door in it. Danny nodded without looking up. I took the long way. Through the archway past the den, up to the foot of the staircase where the light thins and the sound grows. The hall above us trapped and stretched noise like a tunnel. I stood with one hand on the newel post. My palm felt the nick at the corner where Danny had rammed a toy truck when he was 5. The wood wore history, the way faces wear years. I could see the edge of my bedroom door at the end of that hall. Just a sliver, just enough to know it was not closed. Another drawer, a soft gasp of cardboard. A thin old paper smell slipped down the stairwell. It was faint like a thought you tried not to have. I heard my own breath, in, out. My keys clinked in my apron pocket. I pressed them to still them. The hum of the heater vibrated in the wood under my hand. The clock in the dining room reached another minute. I could have called out. I could have climbed that last set of steps and filled the doorway and asked a question that had waited 40 years. I looked up the hallway where we keep the winter coats. I watched the rectangle of light against the baseboard. I stepped back. In the kitchen, I ground beans and poured water. The rhythm steadied my hands. The scent pushed back the thin smell of paper. I carried the press to the table and poured 3 cups. Steam curled and then was gone. Danny looked at the cup and then at me. His eyes were his father's eyes when they had been young and clean. "Thank you," he said. "You are welcome," I said. We did not talk about Sophie. We did not talk about upstairs. We talked about how the rain had held off, how the cedar had dropped cones early this year, how the neighborhood was changing. The words did the work of words. The silence did another job entirely. 30 minutes became 40. The clock told the truth the way clocks do. I stared at the same patch of tablecloth so long the linen weave became a pattern of tiny rivers. The candles burned lower and made a shallow ocean of wax. The footsteps came back down the stairs. Slow, measured. The runner sighed under her weight. Sophie appeared in the doorway, and for a second she did not look like Sophie. Her skin had lost its color. Her mouth could not decide what it was. Her hands were empty and not. Her eyes were red in a way that did not mean tears. It meant winter. She crossed to Danny and leaned so close her hair touched his cheek. Her whisper found his ear and froze there. I watched her lips shape nothing I could catch. I watched Danny freeze and thaw in the space of a breath. His glass met the table a shade too hard. The sound made the candles shiver. He did not apologize. He did not smile that careful smile he uses in rooms where he is the only one who knows the truth. He lifted his face to mine and finally looked at me as if words had weight and he was ready to lift them. "Mom," he said. "Yes," I said. I held the rim of my cup because it was something I could hold. "Upstairs," he said. The keys in my pocket went still. The heater hum cut itself in the middle. The house listened. We climbed the stairs without speaking. The runner hushed our feet. Lemon oil rose from the rail where hands have learned where to go. At the landing, the hall narrowed the sound into a ribbon. The light was thin up there. Dust turned in it like snow that would not melt. My bedroom door sat a breath open. I had left it closed. The gap felt like a word halfway said. Inside the bed stayed perfect corners tucked and smooth. The closet did not. Its doors stood wide. Hangers swung a fraction. On the floor in the rectangle of light from the window lay a tin cigar box with a seam of rust along its lid. I knew that box. It had slept behind winter coats and never wanted light. Sophie stood by the window with her back to us. Her arms crossed, hands pressed to her elbows as if she had to hold herself together to keep from spilling. Her face in the glass was not her face. It looked thin and far away in the reflection. She watched the yard. The cedar moved a little. Danny went to the box and bent. He touched it as if it might bite, and then lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of envelopes splayed like old feathers. Yellowed paper. Edges soft from air and time. Cedar Ridge Behavioral Center printed along the top in blue. His hands were careful. He pulled one out, slid a strip of finger under the flap, and opened the letter. The paper made a small sound. He read. At first his eyes moved. Then his mouth moved too. "Dear Mom, I turned 17 today. No one here remembered. They forgot the cake. Will you come visit me soon? I miss you." He did not read the last line. He held the page with 2 fingers. He looked at me. His voice came out as if it had been shoved through a small space. "Who is Michael?" I answered because there was only one answer and no space left around it. "Your brother." The words struck the room. Everything we had polished could not help. "I do not have a brother," he said. He was not yelling. It would have been easier if he had yelled. "You were my only child here," I said. It was true in the narrow way truth can be true and still be wrong. We sent Michael away when he was 16. He was not like you. Not like me, how? The questions came clean and spare. They did not need help. He had episodes, I said. He broke things. He tried to hurt himself. The sentences tasted like old metal the second they left my mouth. Sophie turned. Her eyes were the red of waking in the night too many times. She reached into the box and lifted a thin folder. The clasp was bent the way thin metal bends. She fanned papers with stamps and signatures. "This says major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety," she said. "It says he responded to therapy. It says a family plan would be helpful. It does not say violent. It does not say he tried to hurt himself." Her voice did not climb. It did not need to. Danny picked up another letter and read without reading. He put it down. He picked up one from 5 years in. "Dear Mom, please write to me. I promise to be good if I can come home." He closed his eyes. He opened them. He reached into the box and pulled a folded piece of paper lined with grease pencil. It was a map. It had my handwriting on the margin: Cedar Ridge, Gresham, a turnoff Stark. I had marked a star. "How far is this?" he asked. 28 minutes, I said. The number had not moved in 40 years. He stared at the star as if it might burn a hole in the paper. He folded it once and set it beside the letters. He did not look at me while he spoke. "Why did you tell me I was an only child?" "Because I wanted you to be free," I said. "Because I thought if we locked that door, the rest of the house would stay clean." He turned then. His mouth was a straight line. "He is a person," he said. "He is not a stain on a runner." I did not answer. He did not wait for one. Sophie slid the folder back into the box and closed the lid. The metal clicked. She held the box to her chest like something living. Danny stood. He set the letter on the bed and smoothed it once, as if smoothing a crease might change the words on it. "We are going to see him," he said, "tonight." "I will get my purse," I said. I did not move. "No," he said. The word was not loud. It did not come from anger. It came from a new place in him. "You do not come unless you can be honest. Do not make him carry your silence again." Sophie shifted the box to one arm and touched Danny's shoulder with the other. He did not look at her. He did not look at me. He looked at the window and the cedar and the space between them. He left the room. She followed. The box tilted against her and made a soft clap against her hip. On the stairs, the runner took the sound and made it damp. The front door opened. The front door closed. The house held its breath and then let it go. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched the place where the letter had been, as if heat might still be there. The heater upstairs started again with the same hum. I counted the seconds of the hum to give the air a shape. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and set it on the burner. The metal tapped on the grate. I ground coffee by hand, the Berg grinding beans to memory. The radio sat on the windowsill above the sink. I turned the knob and caught a talk show wrapped in static. The voices swam and then faded. The kettle hissed. I poured and pressed and watched the bloom fall. I did not drink it. I stood and listened to the heater and the radio and my own breath. The house had rooms I had not gone into for years. Some doors had never been locked and still did not open. I walked down the hall and stopped at the last door on the right. The wood had a pale ring near the knob where thumbs had turned it when they were smaller. The room smelled like old paper and dust that has stayed still a very long time. I pushed the curtains back and daylight found motes and made them dance. The bed was narrow. The quilt had cars on it that no one drives now. The desk faced the wall. Pencils stood in a cup, erasers hardened at the ends. Posters of bands had curled at the corners. A timeline of solar system planets drooped by one thumbtack. On the edge of the headboard, tiny cuts marked height. Lines in pencil, names of months. M for March, A for April. They stopped at 15. After that, there was only smooth wood. The grain showed rings like a tree trunk in a book. I opened the top drawer of the desk. A notebook lay there. The cover had been bent back so many times a white ridge cut the cardboard. Inside were drawings, trees, houses, a bird. On each page, a small date sat in the corner. 12, 13, 14. At 15, the pages turned and then stayed blank. The blank felt louder than anything with ink. I sat in the chair. It was too small for me. It creaked the way it had creaked when feet could still swing above the floor. My hand spread on the desk wood. The grain ran under my palm like a river that kept going even if no one looked at it. The phone rang. The old landline. Its bell is real. It does not imitate. I lifted the receiver and said hello to fill the line with something. "Mrs. Harlow," a man said. "This is Evan Klein. Your son retained me to confirm a residence for Michael Harlow. My mouth tasted like coffee I had not drunk. Yes, I said. He is at Cedar Ridge Behavioral Center in Gresham. He has been there since 1985. He's alive. He is stable. Records show sporadic outbound calls and letters to the home address on file. There is no record of inbound visits from you. Today there were 2 visitors, your son and his wife. I pressed my hand to the desk until my palm tingled. Is he all right? I asked. The question had no size that fit. Physically, yes, he said. For the rest, you would need to ask his care team. Thank you, I said. The words fell to the floor. I set the receiver down. The line clicked back to itself. The house had gone quiet. The heater stopped mid-hum. The radio lost its voice and kept it static. I closed the notebook and put it back where it had been. I closed the drawer and stood. I closed the door to the room and stood again. Night moved in slow and soft. Streetlight turned the hallway into amber. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the window turn black. My cup of coffee had an oil sheen on it like water in a gutter. The clock told me minutes I could not name. When the phone rang again, I lifted the receiver before the second bell. Mom, Danny said. The voice was flat and tired. It had been used for something hard. We saw him. I gripped the edge of the table. How is he? I asked. He asked if you would come someday, Danny said. He drew in air and let it out. I am coming at 8 a.m. Be ready, or we go without you. Danny picked me up at 8 with the engine already warm. The breath from the vent smelled faintly of pine cleaner. We said good morning like people say it in lobbies and elevators. He wore the same navy sweater. The sky was a single sheet of gray. The cedar in my yard clicked its cones against each other as if telling us to go. The drive out to Gresham held a quiet that did not ask to be filled. We passed warehouses with loading doors closed like eyelids. The wipers made a gentle sound across a windshield that did not need them. The tires murmured on damp asphalt. I kept my hands on my knees and watched signs slide by. Stark, 181st, a gas station that has been a gas station for as long as I have lived here. Cedar Ridge sat back from the road behind a shallow sweep of lawn and hedges shaped into polite curves. 3 stories, sand-colored stucco, white bars on windows that did not pretend to be anything else. Inside, the air held disinfectant and a sweet smell like overripe peaches from the dining hall. Fluorescent tubes buzzed. The buzz felt like the heater at home, only brighter and higher, as if it had decided to become light. A nurse met us at the desk and introduced herself as Lila Park. She was young and carried a clipboard close to her ribs. Her smile was practiced but not empty. She recognized the names on our driver's licenses and slid visitor stickers across the counter with a gentle push. Her voice made round vowels that sat warm in the mouth. He likes the garden in the morning, she said. There is a bench by the koi pond. He sits there most days. We followed her down a hallway painted the color of a waiting room. Doors with numbers, a bulletin board with cutout leaves in construction paper, and names written in black marker. Voices from a TV room bled into the hall and then faded. At the end, a set of double doors led us out to a courtyard edged with boxwood and a sweep of winter grass. The sky had lifted a little. The pond sat shallow and oval, a strip of pale stones around it like a collar. The water moved just enough to catch the light. He was on the bench closest to the water, leaning forward slightly as if he were listening for something under the surface. Beige shirt, denim pants that hung straight, hair the color of ash after a fire has gone out. The shape of his shoulders was familiar in a way that made my body feel heavier and lighter at once. He did not look up when the door swung closed behind us. Danny went first. He walked like someone who was trying to both hurry and not startle a bird. He stopped at the side of the bench and kept his hands at his sides. "Hey, Mikey," he said. Michael turned his head slowly as if every motion belonged to the sound of the water. His smile rose without effort. It was a child's smile. It did not hold history. "You came back," he said. Danny let out a breath I did not know he had been holding. "Yeah," he said. "I came back." I stood a step behind. My feet felt the give of the grass, the small damp that comes through the soles of shoes in February. Lila stayed near the door and watched us, in a way that did not intrude. A ribbon of cold air threaded the courtyard and touched my throat. I sat on the bench opposite him so the pond lived between us. My voice did not want to cooperate. I offered it something small to carry. "Hello, Michael," I said. He studied my face. Honey-colored eyes, the same as mine when they were young. He tilted his head the way a bird does. "You are my mom," he said. It was not a question. It sounded like a piece of information placed on a table. "Yes," I said. The word stood in the air and asked for a second word. There was only one that made sense. "I am sorry." He looked back at the pond. The koi moved under the skin of the water in slow oranges and whites. "Lila brings cookies on Fridays," he said. "Do you bring cookies too?" "Yes," I said, "I can bring cookies." His shoulder relaxed by a fraction. Danny shifted his weight and sat beside him. He spoke quietly as if the words might slip and scare the fish. "Mikey, we want you to leave here," he said. "We want you to come live with us." Michael's brow pinched into a small crease. He did not look frightened. He looked as if he were checking instructions he had learned a long time ago. "How long am I allowed to be out?" he asked. "As long as you want," Danny said. "You do not have to come back unless you choose to." Michael processed this as if he had never been given that grammar before. His gaze moved to Lila, and she nodded once to let the idea find a place. He glanced at me with the same careful look as if I would correct the answer if it were wrong. I nodded too because the answer was the only one that made sense. Lila stepped closer and lowered her voice. "We should speak with the director," she said. "She will want to meet you and go over his file." Inside the hall felt brighter than it had a moment ago. We followed her up one flight of stairs to an office with a window that looked over a piece of parking lot and the edge of the lawn. A plant grew in a pot by a bookcase. It had been watered properly. Diplomas hung in a neat row behind a desk. A woman with a brown bun and thin glasses stood when we came in and offered hands. Her nameplate read Karen Whitaker, Director. "Thank you for coming," she said, and she meant the thank you. She had a folder on the desk already open. She touched it with 2 fingers and then lifted a page. Michael Harlow, admitted March 15th, 1985, 16 years old at the time. Initial diagnosis of major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety. Treatment plan included medication and weekly therapy. Her tone held to facts. She turned a page. Within 5 years, he showed significant improvement. We recommended a return to family environment without patient follow-up. We sent several letters to the home address we have on file. She did not look up when she said letters. She did when she said home. I kept my eyes on a pencil cup. The pencils stood with their points upward. After 10 years, she continued requests to coordinate family visits ceased. He adapted to programming here, art workshops, gardening. He is a cooperative resident. No incidents of harm to self or others on record for decades. Danny let his hands fold together in his lap. The knuckles were white. "What do we need to do?" he asked. It sounded like a question, but it was more a way to set something in motion. "We will complete an updated psychiatric evaluation," Dr. Whitaker said. "We also need a re-entry plan, where he will live, who will be his legal guardian if that is necessary. Confirm medication continuity and therapy. We would like to gradually increase exposure to the home environment." She turned toward me and did not soften her face when she did it. "What will your role be?" she asked. Danny answered before I found a shape for breath. "She will be here," he said. "She will not miss." Dr. Whitaker nodded and made a small note on a pad. "You can visit daily," she said. "In fact, I recommend it. He needs repetition. He needs to see that this is not a single day." We left the room and followed the hall back to the courtyard. The light had shifted again. The sky showed a break where a thin band of blue pushed through gray. The buzz of the fixtures behind us softened as the door closed and gave way to the sound of leaves moving in a breeze. I had not known I had missed that sound until it returned. Michael had not moved far. He sat on the same bench with a small spiral notebook open on his knees. A pencil lay across the coil. He had sketched the outline of the old cedar at the far edge of the lawn. The trunk took the paper with a patient hand. The suggestion of branches went off the page. He did not try to put every leaf down. He only marked where they would be. "Can I see?" I asked. He lifted the notebook for a moment and then set it back as if he wanted to keep the drawing where it was being made. "It is hard to draw all the leaves," he said, "but I like to try." "You were good at drawing when you were small," I said. The memory came with the smell of boiled pasta and a television low in the other room and a boy at a table with his tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth while he colored. We hung your pictures on the refrigerator. He blinked. This was new information. You knew I draw, he said. I did, I said. We sat without speaking. The wind found the top of the hedge and made a brushing sound. The koi rippled the pond and wrote the light into slow lines. Danny stood with his hands in his coat pockets and watched the water, and then his brother, and then me. Michael closed the notebook and held it with both hands like something with weight. He looked at Danny. He looked at me. He looked at Lila again and got another nod that said this moment was real. Okay, he said. I will go. The word did not sound like a leap. It sounded like a step taken with care onto ground that looked firm. Lila's smile reached the corners of her eyes. We will start the evaluation today, she said. Come back tomorrow. Dr. Whitaker had joined us at the doorway. Her glasses caught a gray square of sky. She repeated the sentence as if to anchor it for all of us. Tomorrow, she said. Danny nodded. I found my own head moving. The breeze brushed the cedar and the sound it made covered the memory of the old buzz in my house. I stood and gripped the back of the bench to steady my hands. Tomorrow, I said. The week moved in measured pieces. We showed up in the mornings with a paper sack that smelled of butter and sugar. Lila signed us in and wrote the date on a whiteboard. Michael learned the names of the weekday nurses. He learned where the light switch clicked in the TV room and how the remote needed 2 patient presses to change a channel. He liked the window that faced the small birch. He liked to sit there with a spiral pad and a pencil and draw the shape of branches against winter sky. On Tuesday, he tried the chocolate chip cookies and ate 2 and saved 1 in a napkin. On Wednesday, he asked for the 3rd cookie and chewed slowly while the afternoon news threaded soft voices through the air. On Thursday, he asked if Friday had cookies too, and Lila smiled and said yes and handed him a glass of milk. Dr. Whitaker kept her words precise. Her staff moved the evaluation along. Michael answered questions and looked at the floor when he needed time to reach the right word. He did not hurry. The doctor did not hurry him. Danny watched with his jaw set tight and his hands in his coat pockets. I sat and learned the names for things I had wanted not to know. Discharge day came with pale sun. The courtyard looked softer. Lila met us at the door with a clipboard and a tremble at the edge of her smile. Michael stood beside her with 2 small suitcases and his spiral pad tucked under his arm. His shirt was pressed. His hair lay flat. The koi swam a slow oval behind him. Ready, Danny said. Michael nodded and then turned and looked at the building as if he were reading it one last time. Lila pulled him into a quick hug and told him to call if he wanted to tell her something good. He thanked her for Fridays. She wiped her eye with the back of her hand. We carried boxes to the car until the back seat and the trunk held 16 cardboard squares. The labels read drawings in a careful hand. Michael watched each box go as if it were a person getting on a bus. He did not take his eyes off the front of Cedar Ridge until the hedges took it from view. The buzz of the fixtures had nowhere to live on the road. The car filled with the small sounds of a heater fan, the occasional click of a turn signal, the soft knock of a box settling behind us. At the house, Sophie held the front door and said welcome like it was a word she had been waiting to say. We took Michael upstairs. His room smelled faintly of new paint. The walls were a green you could breathe through. Son sat on the desk by the window. On the wall above it hung a frame with a drawing of a tree he had made years ago at a small desk that faced a cinder block wall. The trunk in the drawing held steady. The branches reached past the page. Michael stepped close. He touched the edge of the frame. His fingers were careful. It is mine, he said, small and certain. It is, Danny said. The first night, the house felt louder than a hospital. The microwave beeped too sharply. The shower knobs asked too many choices. Michael stood in the hallway at 2 a.m. and listened to the road and the neighbor's dog and the distant long whistle of a freight train. Danny found him there and opened a window a hand's width. The cedar let the wind write a low song into the room. Michael sat on the floor and set his back to the wall and closed his eyes for 3 long breaths. Then he went back to bed and did not call out. In the afternoon, we took him to Laurelhurst Park. The lake held a skin of ripples. Ducks made their quiet remarks and lifted their tails. Michael stood at the water with a slice of bread and pinched off small pieces. A duck swam in confident and round. When the bread touched the surface and the duck made a soft slap with its bill, Michael laughed. It came quick and clean. It startled me and then warmed the space behind my ribs. He fed them until his pockets were empty, and his smile loosened the skin around his eyes. At home, he sat at his desk and sharpened pencils to points that looked like they knew their job. He drew the tree outside the window and did not try to name all the leaves. He put the paper aside and started again on another angle. He did not say he was practicing. He simply did it until the light changed and the lines told him to stop. 3 weeks later, Sophie tied silver balloons to the chairbacks and taped a banner above the doorway that said, "Happy Birthday, Mikey." She had cut the letters by hand, and a few leaned into each other, as if they were in on something together. The cake from a bakery on Hawthorne had 3 tiers with strawberries and cream. The house smelled like sugar and coffee, and the faint clean of a just-wiped counter. Michael paused on the stairs and stared at everything as if it might be a trick. He walked his hand along each ribbon to see if it was real. He touched the frosting with the tip of a finger and tasted and nodded as if he had confirmed something important. We ate lasagna at the dining table and talked about the park and which ducks he liked and how they lined up like they had been told to. Michael counted plates. 1 for each of us. 4 of us, he said softly. He seemed to like the way the number sat on his tongue. After dinner, Danny brought out a small box and placed it in front of him. Michael opened it and found a phone with large numbers saved in it. Danny had programmed his number and Sophie's and mine. Michael held the phone like a new bird. He tapped the screen and watched it wake and sleep. He put it in his shirt pocket without zipping it and then took it back out to check again. Sophie gave him a wrapped rectangle that turned out to be a set of pencils and watercolors and paper with a tooth that caught the light. Michael ran his fingers along the rows and did not try to hide how much he liked the feel of a thing made for drawing. I set a small velvet box in front of him last. He opened it and found my father's pocket watch. The case had been polished, but not too much. The face was plain and the hands moved with a quiet that felt like respect. The back carried a shallow swirl of scratches that looked like rings in wood. He pressed the watch to his ear. He listened to it count. "It works," he said. "It does," I said. We lit 63 candles because Sophie said every year gets a light. The flame turned the room warmer and made small shadows on our faces. Michael took in the whole of it and smiled. He closed his eyes when we sang and opened them on the last note and blew. He blew again. The third breath took the stubborn ones. Smoke curled up and bent toward the window. We clapped. He looked a little surprised at the sound and then pleased that he could make a room do that. We cut slices and ate in small bites. The strawberries were sweet. The cream held its shape. Michael dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin like he had seen Danny do. He set his fork down and looked at me. He did not raise his voice. He did not look away. "Why did you not visit me?" he said, "all those years. Was it because I was different?" The air settled. The balloons turned a little in a draft none of us felt. I heard a car pass outside and fade. I heard the watch in his palm tick twice. "It was not because you were different," I said. I kept my eyes on his. "It was because I was afraid. I did not know how to fix it. I did not know how to tell the truth. I chose to leave you there and tell myself it was better for you and for us. I was wrong. I am sorry." He sat with that. He did not rush to ease it for me. He looked down at his hands and then at the cake and then at Sophie and Danny. He looked back at me. "Sometimes I left too," he said, "in my head. When it was loud, I would draw, I would think about trees." "Can I try now?" I said, "to show up, to not leave." He nodded once. "You can try." The next week, a woman with short hair and a calm voice sat with us at the dining table and asked Michael what a hard day felt like and where in his body he noticed the feeling. Her name was Dr. Anjali Singh. She had a small notebook and a way of waiting that did not feel like waiting. She taught him how to count breaths with the tip of a finger on his wrist. She taught all of us how to move a hard moment from a flood to a puddle. Michael liked the part where she said he could choose how many decisions to make in a day. He liked that someone said one choice was enough sometimes. He wrote that in his spiral pad and showed it to me later, as if to prove he had understood. Danny found a small art workshop in a brick building that smelled of coffee and old wood. A man named Cole Bennett ran it. He had paint under his nails and a way of standing that said he had spent hours looking and had learned how not to hurry. On the first day, Michael held his pencil too tight. On the second, he loosened his grip and found a line that did not shake. On the third, he sat a little longer before needing to step outside. An older woman with a soft voice and warm eyes introduced herself as Ruth Delgado. She liked to draw trees. She asked Michael if he wanted to sit at the big table near the window where the light found the paper just right. He nodded and set his spiral pad next to hers. They did not talk much. They drew. When class ended, Michael gathered his things and checked his pocket for his phone and the watch. He stood by the door and watched the street for a minute as if to make sure it would be there when he looked again. Cole came over and slipped his hands into his back pockets and watched the paper that held a trunk and a start of branches. He has patience in his lines, Cole said to Danny. That takes years. Michael learned the house like a new language. The grocery store was the hard chapter. Aisles of color, music from speakers that did not have a face. He stood still at the end of the cereal row and watched boxes speak at him. Sophie put a hand on his elbow and said we only need 2 things. He nodded and let his eyes find the word milk and the word bread. He carried them to the counter as if crossing a narrow bridge. On Thursdays, he called Sophie in the afternoon for no reason but to hear another voice. He read the weather from the corner of his phone. He told her the cloud cover as if it were important, which it was because it had been for years. He called me in the evening and said, "Tell me something true today," and I told him a small thing I had noticed. The way the cedar moved against a white sky. The smell of coffee from the corner cafe that used to be a shoe repair. On a soft Saturday, the workshop on Alberta held a small show for students. The bricks smelled warm, and there was a table with cups and a plate of crackers that no one touched at first. Cole hung 10 of Michael's drawings in a row on a clean wall. He called the set growth rings on a card written in black ink, trees, birds, a set of hands, a house roofline seen from below. Michael stood 3 steps back and watched strangers stop and lean in. They did not know him. They knew paper and line and the breath between them. An older man with a careful jacket tapped the glass with a knuckle and then pulled his hand back. He looked at Cole, then at Michael. He said, "The trees have patience. I can feel time in them." Michael said I had time. The man bought one. Then a woman in a green coat asked for another. Michael watched the cash leave hands. He tucked the bills into his wallet like they might change shape if he moved too fast. When we walked out into the late afternoon, the street held a steady stream of people. Michael held the envelope with the receipt and the words "sold" on a stub, and his eyes had that light that comes from a full thing that has found a way out. He did not speak. He did not need to. At home, Dr. Singh came by with a soft scarf around her neck and left her shoes at the door. She sat at the table and asked Michael how it felt when the room was too full, and he showed her with his hands how the air can press. She asked Danny what happens in his body when he cannot fix something, and he laughed once and then smiled without humor and said, "My jaw." She asked me what I do when the old sound starts in my chest, and I put my palm flat on the table and felt wood. She did not tell us what it meant. She taught us a way to move from a rush to a step. She taught Michael to count to 4 in and to 4 hold and to 6 out. He practiced with his finger on the inside of his wrist. He looked at the point he touched as if it were a small door. Soon the idea of a place of his own sat in the room between us. No one pitched it. It was more like steam on a window that draws itself into letters. We drove 10 minutes from Danny's house to a building near Laurelhurst with a 3rd-floor corner and a window that took the light all day. There was a clean yard with a maple. The hallway smelled like laundry. The apartment had 1 bedroom and a living room with a wide sill. The paint was a decent white. The floor held a slight creak in one spot near the kitchen. Michael walked to the window and stood there and did not say anything for a long time. He turned his palm out and felt where the light landed. He looked at the space where a desk would sit so he could see the trees. He nodded once and looked at Danny. He did not smile. He did not need to. We moved him in on a day with thin sun. Boxes went up the stairs. The watch stayed on his wrist. The phone went in and out of his pocket a dozen times. Sophie wiped shelves with a cloth that smelled like lemons. Danny lifted the heavy pieces and breathed through his nose. I carried a bag of kitchen things and put them in drawers, and tried not to tell the Forks where to live. We stood by the door when it was done. The room held a couch and a table and a shelf waiting for drawings. Danny held out a small ring of keys. A brush tag read Mikey H. in block letters. Sophie had added a green rubber leaf to the ring so it would not hide itself in a pocket. Danny put the keys in Michael's palm. The metal was cool and small. I took a key from my pocket. The brass had a bit of old on it from my house. I had had it cut last week and it had a new shine. My hand shook. I gave it to him. It lay beside the others with equal weight. "I locked too many doors," I said. "This one is yours to open." "Can I make a copy for you?" he asked, in case I locked myself out. "Yes," I said, and had to sit down for a moment. We made coffee on a small machine that clicked when it finished. The apartment filled with that smell that makes rooms feel layered, as if many mornings could live at once. Michael pulled a drawing from a box and hung it on a small nail above the desk. It was a new one. A canopy of cedar, the leaves made of short marks, the sky of open paper. He stepped back and looked. The window was open a hand's width, and the wind rode a low ribbon of sound across the sill. We went back to Cedar Ridge together one afternoon, the four of us. The hedges were trimmed. The koi were slow in the cold. Lila met us with a grin that reached both cheeks, and then broke and turned to a hand at her eye. Michael pulled a photo from his pocket. It was from the birthday. Balloons over his head, cake on the table. He held it out. Lila took it and nodded and said, "That is a good cake." He told her about the ducks. He told her about the window in his apartment. She squeezed his hands and told him she would keep Fridays for him if he ever wanted a cookie on that day again. He laughed and said he had learned to bring his own. Time did the quiet work it does. Michael went to class and drew, and sometimes had to stand at the door and breathe before he could sit. He met Ruth for coffee after on a small street where the cups were thick and the tables were slightly too small. They talked about paper and trees, and she told him the names of 3 birds outside the window, and he practiced saying them under his breath until the syllables sat right. He called me every Thursday at 7. He said, "Tell me something real," and I told him the sky looked like a lid, or the cedar had a broken branch, or the neighbor had a new dog that did not bark at leaves. He learned the path around the park that suited his feet. He found the grocery aisle that was the least loud. He stood in his window at sunset and let the light climb his wall without asking it to stay. There were days the air pressed. He would put a hand on his wrist and count. He would open the window the width of his palm and let the wind move the curtain. He would pick up a pencil and make one line and then another. The line did not make everything right. It made one true thing on paper. It was enough to stand on for a minute. One evening I came by with a bag of apples and a jar of soup. He let me in and took the bag and put the soup in the fridge. The apartment smelled like coffee and graphite. The wall held 3 new drawings, one of the maple on his block, one of a pair of hands that could have been anyone's, one of a doorway with light around it. On the shelf below them sat the pocket watch face up. The second hand ticked a clean circle. Beside it sat a small slice of wood with rings that someone had sanded smooth. He must have bought it at a craft store. He had set the watch on it, as if the metal needed the company of something that had grown. He asked if I wanted to hear the watch. I said yes, and he held it near my ear, and I listened to it count. He did not say anything while I listened. He did not need to. When I left, I stood at his door a moment longer than I needed to. The hall held the smell of someone else's dinner and the sound of a distant TV. He hung his keys on a hook by the door, 3 of them, no extras, no one missing. The tag with his name turned once and settled. At my house, the frame from 1979 still hung on the sideboard. The photo in it had changed. Sophie had taken a new one with a camera that knows how to see in low light. The 4 of us sat under the elm in Danny's yard. We looked like people sitting for a photo. Michael's smile was small and not forced. Danny's hand sat easy on the back of the bench. Sophie's head turned a fraction toward Michael like a question. I stood at the end and did not need to lean in. The space between the figures was not a gap. It was air. On the shelf below the frame sat the pocket watch when it was at my place. It ticked in the room that had held quiet for a long time. Beside it, a shallow bowl I had turned from a piece of cedar years ago. The grain showed rings that caught light and then let it go. The window next to the sideboard was open a small amount the measure I had learned, and the wind moved through the house in a way that felt like the breath after a held breath. Outside, the big cedar threw shadows on the porch. Cones clicked against each other. The evening put a thin gold on the edge of the runner. The heater in the hall was silent. The keys on the hook did not rattle. The house listened to the wind and let it pass. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.